I've been yapping for 25 minutes. Korean webtoons are surging in popularity along with a lot of Korean entertainment like K-drama, K-pop, all that kind of stuff. But so is Japanese anime and manga. And there's this huge debate right now. Is Korean webtoons going to kill Japanese manga? So let's talk about it. But before we get into the video, hi, I'm Brandon Chen. I'm a professional in the manga, webtoon, anime space. I create stories with my studio for those mediums. And before I get into this crazy debate, I want to make sure that you guys smash the like button because that really helps the video out, helps us reach more people. Please do it. Boom, boom, boom. And then subscribe if you haven't yet, if you're interested in anything educational or fun regarding the anime, manga, webtoon, video game space, or anything peripheral to those industries. And yeah, let's get right into the video. So Japanese manga has been around for a super long time. Korean webtoons, a little bit less. It's only a couple decades old, I think. And the Korean webtoon side is really optimized for digital. Japanese manga is really optimized for print. And so kind of when we're going into it, when I think about where the origins are also, Japanese manga comes from Japan, Korean webtoons come from Korea. Both are reaching interesting parts in their journey where they are starting to be more global. So you're starting to see mangaka that are potentially international. There's a lot less international mangaka than there are international webtoon creators. There's actually like thousands and thousands of international webtoon creators, but there's only a handful, like definitely under 100 international mangaka that are actually making it in Japan, right? So when you think about the international creator state, the webtoon side is a lot more common versus Japanese manga. They're trying to change that over in Japan. That's only been in the last, like, I don't know, 5 years that I've seen some sort of shift. That shift comes with the popularization of anime and manga over here in the West and also just generally internationally, right? And as you start to create more global IP, good example being Terminator the anime, you need people from the West to come in and start to integrate a little bit into the manga and anime side. So let's talk about the difference between manga and webtoons, right? Manga is black and white. It's horizontal format, meaning that's optimized for print, serializing weekly or monthly depending on your magazine. So these are usually released in Japan, they're a magazine. And then for how the international people get it from outside of Japan, they have companies that are like Viz Media or Seven Seas or Yen Press that license those titles over here into the US. So they are either subsidiaries of like Shueisha or something like that, or they are just a separate company that license and like will pay a licensing fee to bring the title over here. And so that's typically how that works. And manga chapters tend to be, around double the length in terms of panel length, especially if it's weekly, from a Korean webtoon. And so, when I look at Korean webtoons, what are Korean webtoons? It is, instead of right to left, it's top down, meaning that it's optimized for digital format, which is very different from manga, by the way. I'll talk about this in a second. But because it's top down, you're scrolling on your phone, so it's optimized for digital. It's colored, which is very different and very intensive. And that's part of the reason why you're releasing less chapters per week, because if you were to release the same cadence versus a black and white comic, but you're coloring it, very intensive, very costly, very hard to do, especially on a weekly cadence. It might be possible if you have a massive team behind it, but really you guys are gonna burn out unless you're using like AI or something, if I'm being honest. And obviously webtoons originate in Korea and they have come out in the last really blown up in the last let's say five years, right? And both of these are actually exploding in conjunction with each other, in my opinion, during COVID. It was like manga was starting to get popular, but not so much. Webtoons were kind of there, but not super popular. What happened was COVID trapped us all inside and we're forced to do whatever, right? And then we're all chronically on TikTok, we're all chronically online, we're watching anime on Netflix. I will say that Japanese anime and Japanese manga definitely have to be a major reason for why people are getting into the webtoon space as well. There's a big crossover there. A lot of the stories and the tropes, like isekai and stuff, are very, very, very similar. And so what I think happened was during COVID, webtoon and Japanese anime and manga all exploded in conjunction with each other, and they're kind of coming up together. But why do people think that Korean webtoons are going to take over manga, or why do they think that manga is going to just suppress webtoons? And this is because there's a big opportunity cost in consumers' time, right? When you think about it, what do you do at the end of the day, right? You go to work or you go to school, you come home, you're like, oh God, I'm so tired. I'm on the train and I'm reading a webtoon or I'm reading a manga, or I'm sitting in my bed, I'm reading a webtoon or I'm reading a manga, or I'm watching anime, or I'm doing something, right? You have a limited amount of time, you're competing for that time. And so really webtoons and manga are competing for your time. And of course you can enjoy both. There's no world where there's just one or the other. But realistically, because there is a time like competition of time, one of those mediums will tend to rise to the top. And so let's talk about what people like. What I think that Webtoons does really well, and a big reason for its popularity, is it has to be the digital format. Digital is again, I think it's the future. I think everyone's on digital. If you're older and you like reading books, like that's fantastic, that's good. Personally, me, I'm reading everything on an iPad now. Everything's on my phone, everything's on my iPad, because I don't want to bring a book around anymore. I like the aesthetic of bringing a book around, but I don't actually like to read on paperback anymore, which is really weird of me because I used to love it as a kid, but now chronically online, I love staring at screens, and so I do everything on digital. Even my manga, I read it all digitally. It's so weird. I have like a giant stack of like manga. It's all paperback, and I just have like this shrine in my room. I will literally download the app and just download the same manga that I have on the shelf and just read it on my iPad in my bed. It's weird. But yeah, because Webtoons are optimized for digital, it's very accessible for you to be able to read that stuff at any moment. Manga, on the other hand, they're starting to do it. They're starting to make this accessible, or they have apps that are accessible for you to read stuff on digital. It's not very optimized, and I think it's a little bit segmented. So a good example is like Viz Media probably has the best app right now, but when you think about like other titles, like if I want to read like Blue Lock, for example, I have to go to a different app, which is like the Kodansha app, I think. That historically has a different payment model, I'm pretty sure. They also like have bad reviews, so maybe their app isn't that great. I haven't like used it in a while. It's not as accessible to get the titles that you want to be getting. Versus the Webtoon side, you know, you can download like 1 or 2 or 3 apps and just like have everything. And a lot of them you can read for free as well. Versus like Viz or like the manga apps, usually you have to pay a subscription of some sort. Which by the way, I don't think the subscription is really expensive either. But you know, if you're like a 12-year-old kid, then you're not gonna, what are you gonna do? Steal your parents' credit card? Like, you know, that's kind of hard. And that's part of the reason why people are pirating. And those are usually the kids who are pirating, right? But it's interesting. When you think about also Japan, what is popping off in the Japanese market, guys? It's actually also Webtoons. Like you have Line Manga over there, and I was looking at it. I met with some producers in Anime Expo recently, and they were showing me like the top series on Line Manga, and there was like Jujutsu Kaisen on there, and then there was like 5 Webtoons on there that were like also above Jujutsu Kaisen in the rankings. So I was like, what the hell is going on? So like people are even in Japan are reading a ton of Webtoons. I mean, a lot of them are Korean export. Like they export from Korea into Japan. And again, a lot of the anime that are coming out of Japan, some of them are adapted from Korean Webtoons, which is really interesting. And also a lot of the producers and editors from the manga industry are starting to shift over also into the Webtoon industry, which is double interesting. But let's talk about what manga and Webtoon, let's talk about the quality of the projects. I think from an art perspective, line art wise, I have to say that Japanese mangaka, like from a line art perspective, are just so much, they're so talented. Not to say that the Webtoon artists are like not quite there. It's because that you have color that kind of like doesn't let the line art shine as much. So it's a different type of feel. So I think that like series like One Punch Man by Yusuke Murata and like you could never really, it would be really difficult to attain that style of art on a like normal cadence for a Webtoon. Like that would be extremely difficult. Again, Yusuke Murata is not publishing like weekly anyway, so you know maybe that's not a fair assessment. But you know, it's very hard to attain that level for a Korean Webtoon. I will say that Korean Webtoons, their production cycle also is very different from Japanese manga. So like I see Korean production houses and just Webtoon houses in general, they're very similar to what I think like an animation studio is kind of like how it's structured, minus like the artists who are doing in between frames, right? Like when you think about a Webtoon studio, you have like storyboard artist, writer, line artist, flat colorist, background artist, sometimes like 3D modeler, colorist, all this different kinds of stuff. For Japanese manga, you might have like 1 to 2 people and maybe like 2 assistants who are kind of like hybrids, right? Or maybe even more if you're a really big series. But most of the time you have like 4 or 5 people maybe. Sometimes it's just 2 people. So yeah, the Japanese manga, and again, they're working super hard over there. It's just like a completely different production cycle from like this really structured Webtoon production house. houses that exist. And that's the only way that you're gonna ever be able to produce like really high quality webtoons is like if you have a lot of people working on it really. Okay, so that's from an art perspective. I do think that manga and webtoons, there are crazy artists on both sides of the spectrum. I think that there's a lot more innovation happening in the Japanese manga side versus the webtoon side, but that's starting to change as the webtoon industry starts to incorporate a lot more international creators. So like if you look at the stuff that's coming out of Korea, for example, a lot of it's very uniform, meaning that a lot of the styles are kind of just copying each other. Good example, when I think about System Fantasy series, Solo Leveling is, Studio Reidice, who made Solo Leveling, is the core visual art style that everyone's kind of copying, right? And then there's like maybe like True Beauty and like some romance series that also copy the same art style. And so what ends up happening is like you have an art style that everyone's kind of copying, and so therefore a lot of the series out there kind of look the same. And I'm not saying that Japanese manga is not exempt from this. The isekai space in Japan is just as bad. It's like the same, everyone looks the same, the characters look the same, they feel the same. It's garbage, right? But whatever. But I do think it's a bigger problem in the Korean webtoon space where the characters and the art are not innovating that much because, it's a safe bet to create a story and create a style that already, works, right? And Japanese manga, I think, just takes bigger bets. They try more things. And that's both from a narrative perspective and an art perspective. So again, Japanese manga, when I look at line manga or the series that are popular in Japan, when I look at them, a lot of the webtoons that are doing really well over there are the same. They're kind of like, I'm like a romance title that's generic, fantasy title that's generic, fantasy system title that's generic, whatever, right? But then from the manga side, you'll have things that are very different, like Jujutsu Kaisen versus One Piece versus, I don't know, like Record of Ragnarok or something, I don't know, right? There's a lot of different titles out there, Blue Lock, that are completely different from what would succeed in the webtoon space, which is very interesting. I think it's a combination of what readers are willing to read in the webtoon space versus what readers are willing to read in the manga space. For some reason, it seems like people are willing to take bigger risks on manga concepts than they are in the webtoon space, which is so weird. It's so weird to me because like I would think they're on the same app. Are you not reading both manga and webtoon, for the Japanese market at least? In the US market, people are more open to reading whatever, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Well, to an extent. I can go on a completely different tangent for this. But basically, long story short, Japanese manga stories more innovative. Korean webtoons, not so innovative yet. I think they're trying to push some stuff, but every time they try and push some stuff, the readers they always get something new, and the readers are like, we don't want this new thing. And so the publishers are like, let's pull back from doing this new thing. So if you're a reader, please just, whenever you see something that's interesting or cool or different, just like show that you love that thing so that the publishers are more down to try something new. So now let's talk about popularity. When I think about Japanese manga and anime, manga is right now king. Manga is king, and that's because there's been a very long-running track record of success for the manga industry. Like there's a lot of popular anime. One Piece is huge franchise. There's no real series in the webtoon space besides Solo Leveling that are even close to like becoming like a big-time franchise like that. And again, that's probably because it's a newer medium and these are newer titles. They've only been accessible over the last like couple years or so for the international market. But will there be titles that can reach One Piece or Naruto potential? Personal take, Solo Leveling is pretty big. I think it has potential. I think it's just okay, personally, from a narrative perspective, so I'm not sure if it could ever reach One Piece level, because One Piece and Naruto and Dragon Ball, again, these are manga that have like an overall like theme that resonates thematically to international audiences. Solo Leveling is mainly a series that's mainly, like, in my personal opinion, like optimized for entertainment, which again, Naruto and all those series are also entertaining, but I don't think Solo Leveling personally is one of those series where it's like that will like define my childhood. You know what I'm saying? Like it's different. Naruto can define someone's childhood. Solo Leveling I don't think would change someone's life entirely. So I think there's, again, it's a difference in the narrative, the quality of the narrative between the webtoon space and the manga space currently. But I think it's going to change, especially as producers and narrative creators are starting to push what's possible. But also like there's a lot of like really interesting titles out there that are like being pushed into anime. Like I think Tower of God is on the second season of anime. They just announced Omniscient Reader, which I think Omniscient Reader has the potential to be a franchise, or like a big time franchise. Omniscient Reader is actually pretty good, so check that one out. But that one's getting an anime as well. So I do think there's a lot of titles in the webtoon space that have that potential. It just has to, like, we have to see over the next couple of years as, you know, they start to scale outside of the webtoon space into live action, into animation, whether they can ever reach that level that One Piece and Naruto are attaining right now. But let me get into the final thought after all of this yapping. Is manhwa going to replace manga? No. I don't think so. I think they can exist in conjunction with each other. That's the really easy answer. But I do think that in order for someone to want to consume manhwa and webtoons over the Japanese manga side, it has to be a better and stronger narrative than, yeah, it just has to be a better and stronger narrative. I think that right now they're competing, but there's not as many titles in the webtoon space yet that are reaching that level that the highest tier manga can. And again, that's because it's a newer medium. I think it'll reach that point for sure. And so, yeah, that's my personal take. I think that there's a lot of innovation to be made in the webtoon space. That's why I'm in there in this industry, because I think that narratively and artistically, things can be pushed a lot further, and creators and producers can break free a little bit from the kind of like rigid structure of what a lot of webtoons are doing. And I know why they're doing that, because a lot of them are based off of novels, and a lot of the novels are honestly in the web novel space in general for Japanese, English, Korean, Chinese markets. A lot of them are a little bit derivative of each other. And so, yeah, that's my personal take. I do think that webtoons has a lot of room to grow. I think that it's going to be growing. I think that Webtoon US just went public, so they're freaking huge. There's so much money in the space. And so I do think that there's going to be a lot of interesting titles that are going to be coming out, and a lot of partnerships that are coming out too. There's a lot of like intellectual properties like DC Comics, Dungeons and Dragons, I think. There's Avatar: The Last Airbender that are all shifting into the webtoon space, because it's webtoon, again, has a very diverse range of art styles from an international standpoint, not coming out of Korea, but from the US side at least. There's a lot of diverse artists that are working in the space versus like Japanese manga. You know, you have to have a specific style that would work there. So yeah, it's interesting. I think that what definitely is the most interesting part about it is that webtoon has enormous potential because it's global. It is a lot more global from a creative standpoint than manga is right now. Manga is not, it's very Japanese. It's so Japanese, right? Webtoons is not just Korea anymore. It's like Korea, Japan, US, France, South America. It's a lot more global. I do think over the next like 5 to 10 years, they're gonna be coming up with a ton of more interesting stories that are not just like another bullying series or another like system fantasy series. Like there's gonna be a lot more interesting stuff that's gonna be coming into the space, and it's because you have creators from all over the world that are gonna be contributing. That's my personal opinion. That webtoon has a lot of potential. Manga is currently king, but we'll see. I'll probably make another video in another 5 years. I've been yapping for 25 minutes. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching this video. Dawa's my editor. Sorry for making this super long. And I'll catch you guys on next week's video. Let's comment a special word for if you've gotten this far into the video. It's gonna be koi fish. If you comment koi fish, I know that you reached the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching. Peace. Subscribe.